Have you ever heard a story so unbelievable it leaves you breathless? Imagine a young girl punished at school for saying her father was a Navy veteran. Her classmates laughed. Her teacher doubted her. But what happened next shocked the entire room. If you stay with me until the end, you'll discover a twist no one could have predicted. One that will warm your heart and maybe even bring a tear to your eye. Stay tuned. This is a story you won't forget. Wishing you good health, by the way. Where are you watching from and what time is it there right now? The glass windows of Maple Leaf Diner reflected the fiery maples lining the street. Inside, the warmth of the oven and the faint scent of apple pie softened the late October afternoon. A country ballad humming faintly from the old radio. Nate Carrington sat at a corner booth, a mug of black coffee resting on the saucer, his fingers tracing the handle as if one small tap could shake loose memories the way powdered sugar dusts a crust. Overhead, the ceiling fan turned slowly, so slowly that the tick of the clock behind the counter seemed like the diner's own heartbeat. Ray Doyle pushed through the swinging kitchen door, flour dust still on his hands, his eyes smiling the way only a man who had seen many autumns in Brattleboro could. "Town's getting ready for the Autumn Festival," he said, setting down a fresh pot of coffee. "You should come by, Nate. Folks would be glad to see you." His tone was easy, not pressing, just the kind of New England kindness that lingers without demand. Nate gave a small nod. He added sugar, but didn't stir. The crystals sat heavy at the bottom, shining faintly like sea salt in the light. Outside the window, pickup trucks lined the curb, a soft layer of yellow dust drifting from the trees at the edge of town. On the sidewalk, a few older men chatted about the high school football team and the price of pumpkins, tipping their caps with a casual, "Afternoon, sir." The rhythms of the town moved steady and unbroken, like the Connecticut River running just beyond. The diner bell jingled. A group of art students pushed in, scarves bright against their sweaters. Their chatter lifted the room as they ordered burgers, fries, and milkshakes. When they left, one of the girls tucked a $5 bill into the glass jar marked, "Tips keep the coffee hot." Ray grinned. "Appreciate you folks," and slipped the bill into a wooden drawer. These gestures, small as they were, kept the diner a kind of living room for the whole town. Nate's own order was simple. A hamburger with pickles, no cheese. He ate slowly, each bite more duty than pleasure. Proof that he was still part of the routine. He had built long hauls, quiet returns, solitary dinners. He seldom looked anyone in the eye for more than a moment. And when he spoke, his voice was low, steady, like an old engine running half its life. Ray understood this. He filled the silence with talk of weather, hunting season, and the school band set to play on Veterans Memorial Bridge. "The kids get better every year," he said. "Takes practice, same as anything worth keeping." On the wall behind the counter hung portraits of the town's veterans. Sepia faces, faded Polaroids, frames polished by hand. Some grinned, like men just back from a long winter. Others stared solemnly, still standing before some faraway fog. At the center hung an empty frame, a simple hook waiting. Ray once joked, half serious, "We keep that space open for the stories still being told." Nate never answered, but his eyes lingered there longer than he liked to admit. Some stories were carried not in frames, but in silence. A retired couple entered. The wife peeled off wool gloves, asking Ray about the day's pie. The husband leaned his cane against the chair, greeting him with an easy, "Evening, Ray." Their quiet talk about a grandchild's visit and a mended coat sleeve floated across the room like soft wrapping paper carrying warmth. Nate looked down at his own hands, cracked knuckles, ridges like an old folded map. Ray slid over a slice of pie beside Nate's mug. "First slice of the day. Brings good luck." Nate's mouth tugged at the corner. "Thanks." The cinnamon and baked apples drew him back to a kitchen long gone, the memory sharp as church bells drifting across town. He chewed slowly, letting the warmth sit in his chest. Outside, the wind shifted, leaves spinning like scattered notes. Brattleboro was small, but wide enough for a man to disappear if he wanted. Nate's life moved like a broken pocket watch. Steady hands, wrong hours, always missing someone else's time. He had learned, after years of highways, to stop looking in mirrors, windows, gas stations, passing waves, all blurred into forgettable miles. "Festival's on Saturday," Ray reminded him, nodding toward a poster taped near the door ring toss. "Live music, cider stands, and the town pie contest. You should bring a friend. Or not. Just come." His words fell like a pebble on still water. No push. just an invitation with a way in and a way out. The bell chimed again. A little girl pointed to a photograph of a man in uniform. "Grandma, is that Uncle Tom?" Her voice rang like silver bells. "That's him, sweetheart," the older woman said, smoothing the glass. They smiled, dropped coins into the tip jar, and left. Ray straightened the frame, his large hand steady as if he could pin memory itself in place. Nate finished his plate, left $2 beneath the jar. He saw Ray notice but not pick it up, just lift his chin in thanks. "Take care out there." His voice always made a man feel seen without being judged. Nate murmured, "You too." And the radio shifted to a ballad from the 70 seconds, the singer's gravelly voice telling of a man lost on the road who found his way home one autumn night. Nate's eyes returned to the empty frame. The silence around it hummed louder than the music. Some names left no echo, only a thin chill like morning mist clinging to the river. A young busboy lugged in a crate of apples. "Long line at the farm stand today. Everyone's getting ready." Ray patted his shoulder, then looked back at Nate. "Used to think fall was about endings," he said. "Now I reckon it's more about second chances." The words drifted between them, caught in the steam rising from the coffee. Nate checked his watch. The truck needed service before tomorrow's run. Yet his hand stayed on the mug, reluctant to leave the comfort of pie crust and cinnamon. Outside, an old mailman pedaled past, basket full of envelopes, tipping his cap toward the window. Nate imagined answering, though his lips never moved. Ray gathered menus, straightened a vase of late-blooming jasmine, then paused by Nate's table. "We're putting up flags on the bridge Friday," he said, slow and even. "If you feel like lending a hand." An invitation left open, like the porch light at a neighbor's house. Nate rose, pulling on a jacket frayed at the cuffs. He tucked the bills neatly into his wallet, a long-haul habit. Everything squared away to avoid loss. He glanced one more time at the wall of faces, the clock ticking, the frames shining under yellow light, Ray laughing with the elderly couple, the busboy wiping a table. All in their place, all in rhythm. His hand rested on the door handle. For a beat, he held still, listening to something shift faintly inside his chest, small, like sugar dissolving unnoticed at the bottom of the cup. From downtown came the ringing of church bells, steady, round, fading into the late afternoon. He drew a deep breath, not for courage, just to hold the scent of cinnamon and coffee a moment longer. Nate stood up and left the diner, leaving behind Ray's questioning eyes. Outside, the autumn wind blew harder, as if warning that a change was on its way. Claire Whitmore sat at her desk near the window, the September sunlight spilling across her notebook in pale stripes. The classroom smelled faintly of crayons and pencil shavings, the air restless with the shuffle of sneakers on linoleum. On the bulletin board, cut-out stars and stripes reminded everyone that today was Heroes' Day, a day when each student was asked to speak about someone they admired. When her name was called, Claire stood, fingers gripping the edges of her paper. Her voice was small at first, but steady. "My dad was a Marine," she began, lifting her chin. "He served this country with honor." A ripple of snickers spread across the rows. One boy whispered too loudly, "If he's real, where is he?" A girl with braids rolled her eyes. Claire's chest tightened. She pressed on, though her hand shook, words tumbling out about courage, sacrifice, and the quiet strength she believed lived in her father. The teacher, Mrs. Jennings, interrupted with a careful smile, the kind that could cut more sharply than a laugh. "Claire, sweetie, we do value honesty in this classroom. Maybe it would be better to talk about your mother, who we all know works so hard at the community clinic." The words landed like stones. The laughter grew, muffled but sharp in Claire's ears. She felt heat climb her neck. Her page trembled in her grip until she folded it shut. She lowered her eyes, refusing to cry. Crying would make it worse. She had learned that already. The teacher moved on quickly, calling the next name, pretending nothing had happened. But Claire's ears still rang. Every syllable felt like a splinter under her skin. She sat perfectly still, the way her mother always taught her when people doubted. Don't fight, don't explain, just hold your ground. She stared out the window, where a line of maples along Green Street were beginning to turn, their leaves dropping one by one. Each falling leaf looked like a signal, a quiet reminder that change came whether people believed in it or not. She imagined her father standing under those trees, waiting. When recess came, kids spilled outside, buzzing with energy. Claire lingered, folding and unfolding her paper until the words blurred. A classmate passed by, muttering, "Liar." Another laughed. She slipped the page into her backpack as if burying it away. At the edge of the playground, she sat alone on the swing. The chain creaked as she rocked slowly, her sneakers dragging in the gravel. She could hear the other children laughing, their game spilling across the yard. She tried to steady her breathing, to remember the sound of her mother's voice the night before. "You don't need to prove him to anyone. The truth doesn't depend on their belief." Still, something in her chest ached. The swing swayed gently, each arc carrying her closer to a decision she hadn't yet named. Somewhere inside, the ache was mixing with a spark of defiance. When the bell rang, she rose, brushed the gravel from her skirt, and walked back inside. Her eyes drifted again to the window. A maple leaf stuck to the glass, pressed flat by the wind, bright red against the pale sky. She whispered to herself, so low no one else could hear, "I'll find you." After lunch, the school day slid on with the slow weight of a gray afternoon. Math problems marched across the whiteboard. The second hand on the clock scraped its little circle. Claire copied numbers carefully, keeping her head down, as if neat columns could hold her together. When Mrs. Jennings handed back spelling quizzes, Claire murmured, "Thank you, ma'am," and tucked hers away without looking. She didn't want a gold star or a pity smile. She wanted something no classroom could print or grade. At dismissal, the hallway filled with zippers, laughter, and the soft slap of sneakers. Claire waited by the door, the way she always did, watching parents appear like familiar coats in a crowded closet, wool and denim and corduroy wrapping small shoulders in safety. Her mother, Evelyn, stepped through the bustle with her clinic tote bag, and that steady, end-of-day smile that said, "We made it." Her hair was pulled back. A stethoscope peeked from the bag like a bookmark in a long story. "Hey, honey," she said, kneeling to Claire's height. "How was Heroes Day?" Claire hesitated. "It was fine." She watched the word drift between them and fall. Evelyn studied her face the way she might study a chart, gentle, precise. "Let's get some air." They walked home along Green Street, crisp leaves skittering at their ankles. The sun was low behind the church steeple. The bells were quiet now, saving their voice for the evening hour. On a porch, a neighbor raised a hand. "Good evening, ladies." Evelyn waved back, small-town civility smoothing the rough spots of the day. In their kitchen, Evelyn set water to boil and pulled 2 mugs from the cabinet. She put a spoonful of cocoa mix into one and chamomile into the other, then turned to her daughter. "You want the big mug?" she asked, offering the one with the blue whales. Claire nodded. She climbed onto her usual chair, the one with the wobble only she noticed, and watched steam climb the window like white vines. The table still held the morning's mail flyers for the autumn festival, a coupon book, a letter from the school about canned goods for the food drive. "Do you want to tell me what happened?" Evelyn asked, not pushing, only making space. They laughed, Claire said. "And Mrs. Jennings said it would be better to talk about you, because you're real." She swallowed. "She didn't say I was lying, but it felt like it." Evelyn set the spoon down carefully. "Sometimes adults get clumsy with the truth," she said. "They think they're protecting a child when really they're protecting their own comfort." She placed her hand over Claire's, warm and sure. "I believe you have a right to speak about your father. Whether other people understand, that's on them." "Was he really a Marine?" Claire asked, the question barely a breath. "Yes." Evelyn's voice did not waver, though something moved behind it.
"He was very young. We both were. Life took us down different roads."
"Did he ever know about me?" The words came out, suddenly brave. Evelyn looked toward the window, where the last light was sifting through the trees. "That's a longer story, sweetheart, and some of it is mine to carry." She squeezed Claire's fingers. "But I promise you this. Whatever we face, we'll face it together." They ate dinner, simply roasted chicken, green beans, a roll split with butter. Evelyn told a funny story about a toddler at the clinic who refused a bandage unless it had dinosaurs. Claire laughed despite herself. After dishes, they sat on the porch steps with their mugs, watching a stray cat do its silent patrol along the fence. Far off, someone practiced trumpet, a thin, brave sound. "Mom," Claire said, "if I had a picture of him, people might not laugh." "Pictures prove a moment, not a life," Evelyn said softly. "But they can help." She studied Claire's face. "We have some things in the attic, old boxes I haven't opened in a while." Her tone was careful, a door set on its latch, but not yet opened. "We'll look this weekend, all right?" Claire nodded. The promise felt like a small light in her pocket. Bedtime came with its rituals. Teeth brushed, school clothes laid on the chair, a book left face down on the nightstand. Evelyn turned off the lamp and sat a minute, the quiet between them thick as a quilt. "You're brave," she said. "Bravery isn't loud, it's steady." "Am I in trouble for what I said?" Claire asked in the dark. "No," Evelyn replied. "You told your truth. Tomorrow, let's keep our heads high. Deal?" "Deal." When her mother had gone, Claire lay awake, tracing patterns in the ceiling. She thought about the art room's drying racks, the smell of tempera paint, the way laughter could sting. She thought about the empty space on the classroom wall where the best essays would go, and how she wanted, more than anything, to hang something there that couldn't be pulled down. Sleep came late. In her dreams, the Veterans Memorial Bridge rose out of river mist, and a man stood at the far end with his hands in his jacket pockets, waiting. She couldn't see his face, only the shape of him against a sky the color of old pewter. When she woke, the room was gray-blue with morning. Rain had slicked the street. The maples shivered clean. At school the following day, Mrs. Jennings met her at the door with a thin, bright smile. "New day, Claire. Fresh start." Claire nodded and took her seat. She noticed the way some kids glanced at her and then away. It didn't hurt as sharply as yesterday, but it was still there, a dull pebble in her shoe. She lined up her pencils, sharpened to even points, and told herself to breathe the way her mother taught her, slow in, slow out. At recess, she didn't go to the swings. She walked the far fence line, counting fence posts, pressing her palm to each as if they were beads on a string. Near the storage shed, she found a red maple leaf perfectly flat, pressed by rain onto the wood. Its veins radiated like a small red map. She slipped it between the pages of her notebook, a secret marker no one else would understand. That afternoon on the way home, they stopped by Maple Leaf Diner to pick up a pie for the weekend. The bell chimed. The place smelled like cinnamon and warm dough. Ray lifted a hand. "Good evening, friends," he said, the greeting rolling easy as a porch story. "Let me tell you, first pies came out right on time today." He winked at Claire and slid a sample across the counter on a napkin. "On the house." "Thank you, sir," Claire said, her voice small but steady. Ray leaned in a little. "You keep that chin up, young lady." He didn't say how he knew small towns always do. Outside, the streetlights blinked on. Evelyn carried the pie. Claire tucked her notebook under her arm. The night smelled like wet leaves and wood smoke, the kind of smell that makes a town feel older than its buildings. They walked past the church and the hardware store, past a window filled with carved pumpkins grinning their toothy grins. At their corner, the mailman waved from his porch. "Evening! Evening!" Evelyn called back. They climbed their steps. Inside, Evelyn set the pie on the counter and touched Claire's shoulder. "We'll take a look in the attic on Saturday," she said quietly, as if the house itself were listening. "No promises, just a look." Claire nodded. It was enough to hold on to. She went to her room and opened her notebook to the pressed leaf. Its red brighter against the plain paper. She thought about the picture they might find, if there was one. She thought about the man on the bridge in her dream, hands in pockets, waiting like a question. She turned to the window. Beyond the glass, a maple leaf, bright as a stoplight, clung to the pane in the evening wind. She placed her palm against the cool glass until the leaf's shape blurred beneath her fingers. Then she whispered, the words so soft they barely stirred the air. "I'll find you." The attic smelled of cedar and dust, the kind of scent that clung to trunks and boxes, no matter how many seasons passed. Evelyn pulled the cord for the bare bulb, and its yellow light spread in uneven circles, touching the sloped rafters and casting long shadows. Claire stood at the bottom of the ladder, her notebook pressed to her chest, eyes wide with both excitement and a kind of solemnity. "Come on up," Evelyn called softly. Claire climbed the wooden steps, each creak sounding louder than the last. The attic had always felt like forbidden ground, a place where the weight of family stories slept in cardboard coffins. Now, with her mother beside her, it seemed less haunted and more like a library waiting to be opened. Boxes were stacked in uneven towers, labeled in Evelyn's careful handwriting, winter coats, Christmas lights, medical journals. One stack leaned heavily, its duct tape peeling, revealing a glimpse of old photo albums with cracked spines. Evelyn brushed dust from her hands. "We're not here to dig up everything," she said gently, "just to see." They opened the first box together. Inside were Claire's baby clothes, tiny socks, a knit cap with a fading hospital logo, a blanket washed so many times it had lost its softness. Evelyn lifted it, pressing it to her face with a tenderness that startled her. "Was this mine?" Claire whispered. "Yes, you came home wrapped in it." Evelyn smiled faintly, setting the blanket back. "You were so small, I was afraid I'd break you." Box by box they uncovered fragments. Claire's preschool drawings, birthday cards, a stack of report cards tied with a rubber band. Nothing unusual, nothing unexpected. Claire's eagerness began to dim into quiet patience. It was near the back, under a crate marked college books, that Evelyn's hand paused. She pushed aside the heavier box and pulled forward a small wooden chest with a brass latch. Its surface bore scratches, the kind made by hurried packing, and the edges were dulled by time. Claire knelt beside it, her breath catching. "What's that?" Evelyn didn't answer at first. She ran her fingers over the lid as though weighing whether the chest wanted to be opened. Finally, she said, "Something I haven't looked at in years." The latch gave way with a soft click. Inside lay a bundle of envelopes, their paper yellowed and curled. Tucked among them was a photograph creased, edges worn. Evelyn lifted it with care, her hands trembling. Claire leaned closer. The picture showed a young man in uniform, his smile both proud and shy, his eyes startlingly familiar. The resemblance to her own face was undeniable. The same dark brows, the same determined set of the mouth. "Is that him?" Claire's voice cracked. Evelyn nodded slowly. "Yes, that's your father." For a moment, neither spoke. The attic seemed to hold its breath, the bulb humming faintly above. Claire traced the outline of the man's figure with her eyes, memorizing each detail. She felt a strange blend of joy and sorrow, as if she had found something precious and lost it in the same heartbeat. Evelyn set the photo back into the chest, but Claire reached out, covering her mother's hand. "Please, can I keep it?" Evelyn hesitated, then exhaled. "All right, but be careful with it." She placed the photo into Claire's palm, folding her fingers gently around it. Claire studied it, a flood of questions rising, pressing against her lips. What was his name? Did he ever... She stopped, unsure if she wanted to finish. Evelyn's eyes softened, though sadness lingered at the edges. "His name is Nathaniel Carrington. We called him Nate. We met when I was in nursing school. He was complicated, brave, restless, and not ready for the life that came." She looked away. "When I told him about you, he was already gone." Claire's chest ached, but she held the picture tighter. "So he doesn't know?" "No," Evelyn said simply. "Not then. And after a while, I stopped chasing the idea of telling him. It was just you and me, and I thought that was enough." Silence filled the attic again, thick with what was spoken and what was not. Claire wanted to be angry, but all she felt was the fierce pull of the man in the photo, the way his smile seemed to promise something unfinished. Evelyn brushed hair from Claire's forehead. "Listen to me. Having a picture doesn't mean he will suddenly be here. Don't let it carry more weight than it should." But Claire already knew it meant more than that. Holding the photograph was like holding proof, a shield against laughter and disbelief. It was something she could point to and say, "Here, this is real." When they carried the chest back to its place, Evelyn's movements were slow, reluctant. She turned off the bulb, and they descended into the kitchen's warm light. Claire clutched the photo as if it might disappear in the dark. That night, after Evelyn kissed her goodnight, Claire lay awake studying the photo under her blanket with a flashlight. She pressed it close against her chest, as if the image itself could guide her towards something unfinished, something waiting just beyond the horizon. The next morning dawned with a veil of mist over Brattleboro, softening the rooftops and the steeple in the distance. Evelyn hurried through her routine, gathering files for the clinic. While Claire ate her cereal in silence, the photograph tucked safely inside the first page of her notebook. Each spoonful tasted flat, but she carried a spark in her chest that hadn't been there before. At school, she kept the photo hidden but near, folded between the lined paper. During art class, as the teacher demonstrated how to mix tempera paints, Claire secretly sketched the outline of her father's face. She was no artist, but the act of drawing him felt like speaking with him. Every curve of the jaw, every shadow under the eyes, made him more real. When recess came, she didn't run to the swings or the tetherball court. Instead, she slipped to the far corner of the playground, near the chain-link fence where wildflowers pushed through the cracks. She opened her notebook, looked at the photo again, and whispered questions too soft for anyone to hear. Were you brave? Did you laugh loud? Would you have liked me? A shadow fell across her page. Claire jerked up, tucking the picture away. It was only Molly, a classmate with freckles and a wide smile. What are you hiding? Molly asked, half teasing. Nothing, Claire said quickly. Molly shrugged and pointed to the swing set. Come on. We need one more for our game. Claire hesitated, then shook her head. Maybe later. Molly lingered for a heartbeat, studying her with curiosity, then jogged back across the yard. Claire exhaled in relief. Some secrets needed time to grow strong before they could be shared. That evening, when Evelyn arrived to pick her up, Claire asked if they could stop at the diner again. Evelyn raised an eyebrow, surprised at the request, but agreed. Maple Leaf Diner glowed warm against the encroaching dusk, the smell of cinnamon and fried onions spilling onto the street. Ray greeted them with his familiar wave. Evening, ladies. Got fresh pumpkin pie cooling right now. Want a slice to take home? Evelyn smiled. One for the road, please. While Ray boxed the pie, Claire wandered to the wall of photographs. Her eyes scanned the frames, lingering on each solemn or smiling face. Then she froze. Near the edge of the collage, half shadowed by glare from the lights, was a face she knew. The same brow, the same faint grin. It was him. Her breath caught. Mom? Evelyn stepped beside her, pie box in hand. She followed Claire's gaze and stiffened. That picture? Ray noticed. Ah, that one. Local boy. Served overseas a while back. Haven't seen him around for years. He looked from the photo to Evelyn, then to Claire, sensing the charged air. You know him? Evelyn's voice was steady but low. Yes, once. Ray gave a respectful nod, saying no more. Small towns didn't always need explanations. Sometimes silence was the kindest courtesy. On the walk home, Claire hugged her notebook tightly, her heart pounding. Mom, why is his picture there? Why didn't you tell me? Evelyn sighed, adjusting the strap of her clinic bag. Because I thought it was easier for you not to wonder. Easier to let go. She paused, meeting her daughter's eyes in the fading light. But I see now you need more than easy. You need the truth. They walked the last blocks in silence. Porch lights blinked on, one by one, across the neighborhood. A neighbor waved from a rocking chair. Evelyn waved back automatically, but her mind was elsewhere. At home, Claire slipped away to her room. She laid the photograph beside the pressed maple leaf in her notebook, the two tokens side by side. They looked like pieces of a puzzle, incomplete but promising a picture. She began to write in careful looping letters. His name is Nathaniel Carrington. My mom says he didn't know about me, but he's real. I'll remember his face. The act of writing steadied her. Each word was a stone laid on a path leading somewhere, perhaps toward him, perhaps toward herself. She didn't know yet. Later, Evelyn peeked in to check on her. Claire had fallen asleep with the notebook open, the photograph resting near her hand. Evelyn stood in the doorway, torn between fear and hope. She whispered to the quiet room, though her daughter couldn't hear. He was complicated, but maybe he deserves a second chance. The house settled into nighttime silence, the refrigerator hum, the ticking clock, the distant bark of a dog. In the stillness, the photograph seemed almost alive, holding both the ache of the past and the fragile promise of what might come. The next Saturday morning, Brattleboro buzzed with the hum of preparations. Volunteers strung banners across Main Street, and children chalked leaves and pumpkins on the sidewalks. Claire carried her notebook under her arm, her steps quick and purposeful. Evelyn had given her a few dollars for a hot cider at the farmer's market, but instead she found her feet leading toward Maple Leaf Diner. Through the glass, she saw him. The same jawline from the photograph, though older now, carved with lines at the corners of his eyes. He sat at his usual booth near the window, a mug of coffee steaming in front of him, his gaze distant. The world outside carried on cars idling at the light, shoppers with tote bags, but Claire felt as if everything had slowed to the thump of her heartbeat. She pushed the door open. The bell chimed, and the warm smell of frying bacon and cinnamon rolled over her. Ray called from behind the counter. "Morning, kiddo. Pie's not ready yet, but you can sit a spell." Claire barely nodded. Her legs carried her forward, straight to the booth. Nate looked up, startled by the small figure standing there. For a moment, he thought she might be selling cookies for a fundraiser or delivering a message from school. Then he saw her eyes, his own eyes, mirrored back at him. "Are you Nathaniel Carrington?" she asked, her voice a mix of tremor and resolve. Nate set his mug down slowly. "I go by Nate. Who's asking?" Claire's hand shook as she opened her notebook. She slid the photograph across the table, its creases smoothed by nights of being held. "You're my dad." The diner's noise seemed to fade the clatter of dishes, the hiss of the grill, even Ray's easy banter. Nate stared at the photograph, then at the girl. His breath caught, and he felt the room tilt slightly, like the moment before a truck veers across lanes. He swallowed. "Where did you get this?" "My mom kept it. She told me your name." Claire's fingers tightened on the edge of the table. "I needed to see you." Nate leaned back, his face unreadable. Memories rose uninvited. Evelyn's voice on the phone years ago, words half heard and half avoided, his own stubborn refusal to slow down. He had convinced himself he was not the kind of man who should raise a child. And now, here she was, standing before him with proof that his choice had not erased the truth. "Listen," he said carefully, lowering his voice. "You can't just walk up to someone and—" "But it's you," Claire interrupted. "I can see it. Everyone else thinks I made it up, but I know." Ray drifted closer, sensing the tension. "Everything all right here?" His tone was casual, but his eyes were sharp. Nate forced a half smile. "Yeah, Ray, just catching up." Claire slid into the booth across from him, uninvited but determined. She placed her hands flat on the table, as if pinning him in place with her will. "I just want to know why you weren't there." The question cut deeper than she could understand. Nate looked away out the window where leaves skittered across the sidewalk. His throat tightened. "That's not a story for here." "Then when?" she pressed. Ray cleared his throat softly, giving Nate a chance to retreat. But Nate didn't move. Something about the girl's steady gaze held him there. He leaned forward, elbows on the table. "Your mom, Evelyn, she's the one who should decide how much you know." Claire's jaw set. "She said you didn't know about me, but now you do. So it's your choice, too." For a moment, Nate had no answer. He rubbed a hand over his face, the roughness of stubble grounding him. He thought of the empty frame on the wall of veterans, the one Ray always said was for stories still being told. Maybe this was one of them. Finally, he said, "All right, but you can't just appear here without telling your mom. She'll be worried sick." Claire's eyes softened slightly, but she didn't back down. "Then tell her. Tell her you saw me." The bell over the door jingled again. Evelyn stepped inside, her clinic bag slung over her shoulder. She froze when she saw them, the photograph on the table, her daughter across from Nate, his face pale and stunned. Her voice was quiet but sharp. "Claire, what are you doing?" Evelyn's words cut across the diner like a cold wind through an open door. Claire slid from the booth, clutching her notebook to her chest. "Mom, I just wanted—" "Outside," Evelyn said firmly. Her eyes didn't leave Nate's face. Ray, sensing the storm, retreated behind the counter, busying himself with plates, though his ears stayed sharp. The few other patrons, an elderly couple with pancakes, a man reading the paper, kept their eyes lowered. Small towns knew when to mind their own business. Claire hesitated, torn between defiance and obedience. At last, she slipped past her mother and stepped onto the sidewalk, the bell jingling behind her. The cool air caught her breath, but she didn't care. She pressed her forehead to the glass, straining to hear. Inside, Evelyn approached the booth. Her posture was calm, but her voice held steel. "You had no right." Nate's jaw clenched. She came to me. You should have sent her back to me the moment you realized who she was." He rubbed his hands together, restless. "Evelyn, I didn't even know she existed. Until today. What did you expect me to do, pretend I didn't recognize myself in her face?" Evelyn's breath hitched. She steadied herself. "I expected you to remember that she's a child. My child. Not a problem you can solve with half-truths over coffee." For a long moment, they locked eyes, years of silence pressing between them. Nate finally spoke, his voice rough. "You're right. I don't know how to do this, but I know one thing she deserves better than me. Running away again." Evelyn sat down across from him, surprising herself. Her shoulders lowered, but her eyes remained guarded. "What exactly are you saying?" "I'm saying I want to know her." Nate's gaze softened, almost pleading. "Not to take her from you, not to rewrite what's already happened, just to try, if you'll let me." Outside, Claire's breath fogged the glass. She couldn't hear the words, but she saw the way her mother's expression shifted, anger thinning into something more complicated. Hope? Fear? She pressed her palms flat against the window, silently begging them not to end this conversation with another slammed door. Evelyn drew a long breath. "She's been through enough. If you break her trust, there's no coming back." "I know," Nate said simply. The words hung in the air, more binding than a contract. Ray appeared quietly at the table, refilling Nate's coffee, setting down a glass of water for Evelyn. "On the house," he murmured, then walked away without looking back. It was his way of giving them a pause, a moment to breathe. Evelyn's fingers traced the rim of the glass. She remembered the early days with Nate, his restless energy, his need for open roads, his fear of being pinned down. She had built a life without him, brick by brick, for her daughter's sake. Yet here he sat, older, worn, carrying regret like an extra weight on his shoulders. She whispered, "Why now?" "Because she found me," he said. "And because this time I can't walk away." Through the glass, Claire's eyes stung. She turned and hugged her notebook, the photograph inside pressing into her ribs like a heartbeat. When Evelyn rose, Nate followed her to the door. Claire stepped back quickly as they emerged, her mother's hand finding her shoulder. "We're going home," Evelyn said gently but firmly. Claire looked from her mother to Nate. "But not now," Evelyn interrupted. Nate crouched to Claire's height, his face lined with something raw. "I'm sorry," he said softly. "I didn't know, but I do now, and I'll be here if you'll let me." Tears pricked her eyes, but she nodded. It was all she could manage. Evelyn guided her away, their footsteps echoing down the sidewalk. Nate remained at the diner door, watching them disappear around the corner. His reflection in the glass looked older than he remembered, but behind it, he saw the empty frame on the wall of veterans, a silent reminder that some stories weren't finished yet. Back home, Evelyn set her bag down and pulled Claire close. "I need you to promise me something," she said. "If you want to see him again, we'll do it together. No more running off." Claire nodded, her face buried against her mother's shoulder. "Okay, but you'll let me, won't you?" Evelyn closed her eyes. The question weighed heavier than any she had faced in the clinic, heavier than sleepless nights and overdue bills. She thought of Nate's voice, steady, remorseful, and her daughter's face lit by hope. She whispered, "We'll see." That night, as Claire drifted to sleep, Evelyn stood by the window, arms folded. Outside, the town settled into quiet, porch lights glowing, the faint sound of a fiddle drifting from the community hall. Evelyn let herself imagine, just for a moment, what it might mean if Nate truly stayed. Then she shook her head and drew the curtains. On the far side of town, Nate lay awake in his small rented room above the garage, the photograph replaying in his mind not the one Claire had shown him, but the living image of her standing before him, brave and unflinching. He knew sleep would not come easily. Somewhere between hope and regret, the night carried them both into silence, with only the rustle of autumn leaves as witness. The following evening, the Whitmore house glowed softly against the gathering dark. A porch light illuminated the steps, casting a warm square of gold onto the fallen leaves. Evelyn had just set 2 mugs of cocoa on the kitchen counter when a knock rattled the front door firm. Deliberate, not the polite rap of a neighbor. Claire froze halfway up the staircase. "Mom?" Evelyn set her mug down, wiped her hands on a dish towel, and walked to the door. She hesitated, then pulled it open a crack. Nate stood on the porch, his shoulders hunched against the cold. His jacket looked worn, his eyes more tired than she remembered from the diner. "Evening," he said, voice low. "What are you doing here?" Evelyn's tone was sharp but not cruel. "I needed to see you, to see her." He shifted his weight. "I know, I should have called, but—" "You shouldn't be here at all." Evelyn's grip tightened on the door. Behind her, Claire leaned over the banister, wide-eyed. Nate noticed. His voice softened. "I won't stay if you tell me to go, but please, 5 minutes." "Oh." The silence stretched. Evelyn's pulse thudded in her ears. She glanced at Claire, who was nearly vibrating with hope. At last, Evelyn opened the door just enough for him to step inside. The living room was modest plaid sofa, shelves lined with well-thumbed books, a quilt folded over the armrest. Nate stood awkwardly near the entry, not daring to sit. He felt like a trespasser in a life he had forfeited. Evelyn crossed her arms. "Say what you came to say." Nate's gaze flicked to Claire. She clutched the railing, her eyes searching his. "I didn't know about you," he said simply. "Not then. And I'm sorry." Claire descended the stairs slowly, each step deliberate. She carried her notebook, its corners worn from use. "But you know now," she said. "Yes." He swallowed hard. "And I don't want to run from it." Evelyn interjected, her voice steady. "Words are easy, Nate. Actions are harder. She's not a second chance for you to test yourself. She's my daughter. I've kept her safe all these years without you." Nate nodded, absorbing each word. "I don't expect forgiveness. I don't expect trust overnight. I only want a chance to earn it." He looked at Claire, then back at Evelyn. "Even if that means starting small. Even if all I get is 5 minutes at a time." Claire's heart thudded. She stepped closer, holding out the photograph like a fragile offering. "I've been waiting to give this back to you." Nate accepted it with careful hands. He stared at the younger version of himself, the man who had believed freedom was found in leaving. His throat tightened. "I don't deserve this," he murmured. Claire's voice was quiet but certain. "Maybe not, but I need you to have it." The weight of the photo in his palm felt heavier than any deployment, heavier than miles of empty road. It was a piece of history, but also a key to something ahead. Evelyn's eyes softened, despite herself. She could see Claire's shoulders lift, the hope in her face unmistakable. Against her instincts, Evelyn relented just slightly. "Fine, but only under my watch. No promises, no overnight miracles. You show up, or you don't come at all." Nate met her gaze. Deal. For the first time in years, Evelyn saw sincerity instead of escape in his eyes. She let out a breath she didn't know she'd been holding and stepped aside, leaving the door cracked open as if to mark a boundary. Claire smiled, faint but real. "Can we sit? Just for a little while?" Evelyn hesitated, then gestured to the sofa. Nate sat carefully, perching on the edge like he might be asked to leave at any moment. Claire settled across from him, her notebook balanced on her lap. The cocoa on the counter had cooled, but the air in the room warmed, charged by something fragile and new. The living room clock ticked steadily, each second marking the fragile ground they now shared. Nate's hands rested awkwardly on his knees, the photograph lying face up on the coffee table. Claire leaned forward, studying him as though every breath might reveal a new piece of the puzzle. "So," she began softly, "what do you do now?" Nate cleared his throat. "I drive trucks, long hauls, across states mostly. Keeps me busy." He hesitated, then added, "Pays the bills, but it's lonely work." Claire tilted her head. "Do you ever get tired of the road?" His mouth curved, but without humor. "Every day." But stopping always felt harder. Evelyn sat nearby, arms folded. She wanted to intervene, to steer the conversation, but something in Claire's curiosity held her back. Her daughter deserved answers, even if they were imperfect. "Did you ever think about us?" Claire asked suddenly. The question struck hard. Nate inhaled, steadying himself. "More times than I can count, but I convinced myself it was too late, that I had nothing worth giving." He met her eyes. "I was wrong." Claire blinked quickly, fighting tears. She opened her notebook and scribbled something before showing him. "I don't care if you're late. I just care if you're here." The words stung, beautiful and brutal. Nate pressed a hand over the page, as though to steady it. "You've got more courage than I ever did," he whispered. The sound of a kettle whistling from the kitchen broke the spell. Evelyn rose quickly, grateful for the excuse to move. She busied herself with reheating cocoa, her hands trembling slightly as she poured. She wasn't sure whether to feel relief or fear relief that the walls she built might finally give her daughter what she longed for. Fear that opening the door could shatter them both. When she returned, Nate accepted the mug with a quiet, "Thank you." The three of them sat together, sipping in silence. It was an ordinary act, yet it felt monumental, three people sharing warmth for the first time. Claire broke the quiet. "There's a festival tomorrow, with music and pie contests. Will you come?" Nate hesitated. His instinct was to decline, to step back before he could fail. But then he saw the way her eyes searched him, fragile with hope. "If your mom agrees," he said. Evelyn set her mug down. "It's crowded, and people talk. Let them," Nate said gently. "I'm not here to hide." The words unsettled her, yet they also rang true. She studied him, weighing the years of absence against the sincerity in his voice now. "We'll see," she said finally. Claire beamed, scribbling another line in her notebook. "Maybe we can be seen together." She closed the book before anyone could read more. As the evening wore on, fatigue softened the edges of the moment. Claire leaned against her mother's shoulder, eyelids heavy. Evelyn stroked her hair absently, her gaze flicking to Nate. He was watching, quiet, reverent, as though afraid to disturb the picture. When Claire finally drifted upstairs to bed, Evelyn lingered at the bottom of the stairs. "She'll remember tonight," she said softly. "So will I," Nate replied. They stood in silence until Evelyn spoke again. "Don't promise more than you can keep." "I won't," Nate said. "But I will promise this. I'll be here tomorrow." Evelyn searched his face, half expecting to find the restless boy she once knew. Instead, she saw a man worn thin by regret, but anchored by something steadier now. She gave a small nod, not of forgiveness, but of permission. At the door, Nate paused. The porch light threw his shadow long across the steps. "Thank you for letting me in," he said. "Don't thank me yet," Evelyn answered, her voice even. "Show me first." He nodded and stepped into the night. The cool air wrapped around him, the street lamps humming faintly. For the first time in years, he felt the pull of something other than the open road, a tether leading back to this house, this child, this chance. Inside, Evelyn locked the door, leaning against it with a long exhale. Upstairs, Claire's light flicked off. The house settled into its usual rhythm, but beneath it pulsed a new undercurrent, fragile and untested. Out on the porch, Nate lingered a moment longer, the photograph safe in his pocket. He touched it lightly, as if to assure himself it was still there. Then he walked into the night, not toward the highway, but toward tomorrow. Saturday arrived crisp and clear, the kind of autumn day Vermont seemed made for. The sky stretched bright and blue, the air carrying both wood smoke and the sugary scent of cider. Brattleboro's town green was alive with stalls draped in gingham, children darting between hay bales, and fiddles tuning up for the afternoon music. Claire tugged at her mother's hand as they stepped onto the green. "Do you think he'll really come?" Her notebook bounced in her other hand, pressed close like a talisman. Evelyn scanned the crowd. "We'll see." But Claire's sharp eyes found him first. Nate stood near the pie contest table, shifting awkwardly among the clusters of neighbors. He wore a clean jacket and jeans, simple but neat, and his hands were shoved in his pockets as if to hide the nerves that radiated through his stance. When his gaze met Claire's, a shy smile spread across his face, uncertain but undeniably warm. Claire dropped her mother's hand and ran. Evelyn started to call after her, but the words faded as she saw the way Claire flung herself toward Nate, the way he bent to meet her, catching her in a hug that was both tentative and fierce. For the first time, Evelyn saw something in his face she hadn't expected. Relief. "Hi," Nate said softly, pulling back to look at her. "You came?" Claire replied, grinning. "Promised I would, didn't I?" He glanced toward Evelyn, who was making her way through the crowd. The moment her eyes met his, he gave a respectful nod, not presuming more. Neighbors noticed. Whispers fluttered like leaves. Evelyn Whitmore with a man no one had seen in years, a man with Claire's eyes. Ray, manning the cider booth, lifted his chin in acknowledgement, choosing silence over gossip. Claire didn't care about any of it. She tugged Nate toward the stalls. "Come see! There's caramel apples and pumpkins bigger than me!" Nate let himself be pulled, smiling despite the weight in his chest. He bought her a caramel apple, slipping $1 into the tip jar the way Ray had once taught him long ago. Claire licked the sticky sweetness, her laughter bubbling like music. Evelyn followed at a distance, her protective watch never wavering. When the fiddles began, townsfolk gathered near the bandstand. Claire coaxed Nate closer, clapping to the rhythm. He hesitated, shifting his weight, then let himself tap a foot. Evelyn caught the sight, and for the briefest moment, a memory flickered the boy he once was, grinning at a college dance, hand in hers. She shook it off, grounding herself in the present. Later, as the pie contest announced its winners, Claire leaned against Nate's side, scribbling in her notebook. She wrote, "It feels like having two hands holding me at once." She didn't show him, not yet. Some words were meant to ripen slowly. Evelyn joined them, arms crossed but softer now. "She'll crash from all that sugar soon," she said dryly. Nate smiled faintly. "Then I'll help carry her home." Evelyn studied him. The words weren't grand, but they carried weight. She nodded once, silently permitting the possibility. As the afternoon waned, Claire dragged them both to the hayride wagon. "Please, just once," she begged. The driver tipped his hat. "Room for 3 more." Nate climbed aboard first, offering his hand to Claire, then to Evelyn. She hesitated only a second before accepting. They sat side by side, hay prickling beneath them, the wagon jolting as horses pulled them onto the dirt path lined with maples aflame in red and orange. Claire nestled between them, pointing out every scarecrow, every jack-o'-lantern. The rhythm of the wagon and the crisp air seemed to smooth the sharp edges. For the first time, they looked almost like a family, imperfect, fragile, but real. As the ride curved near the riverbank, the sun dipped lower, painting the water gold. Claire sighed contentedly, leaning her head against Evelyn's shoulder while clutching Nate's sleeve with her other hand. Evelyn glanced at Nate, their eyes meeting over Claire's small form. No words passed, but the moment spoke volumes. Then, from the path's edge, Evelyn caught sight of 2 women whispering, their gazes fixed on the wagon. One shook her head.
"That's him? After all these years?"
Evelyn's stomach tightened. Gossip traveled fast in small towns, faster than forgiveness. Nate noticed her stiffen. He murmured low, so only she could hear. "I can take the heat. Don't let it burn her." Evelyn exhaled slowly, surprised by the steadiness in his tone. She gave a slight nod, and for once, let herself believe he meant it. The wagon jolted to a stop back at the green. Claire hopped down, cheeks flushed, eyes bright. "Best day ever," she declared. But even as she laughed, Evelyn felt the weight of what lay ahead. One festival ride could not erase years of absence, and one autumn afternoon could not guarantee a steady winter. Still, as she watched Nate ruffle Claire's hair, careful and tender, she admitted something she hadn't allowed herself before. The door she'd left cracked open might, one day, swing wide. Evening settled slowly over the town green, lanterns glowing against the deepening blue. Strings of bulbs lit the booths, casting a warm haze over the crowd. Fiddle tunes gave way to a local band, strumming gentle folk songs, the kind that tugged at old memories. Claire clapped along, sticky caramel still on her fingers. She tugged Nate toward the dance floor where parents twirled children and couples moved in easy circles. "Come on," she urged. Nate chuckled nervously. "I don't dance." "Yes, you do," Claire insisted. "Everyone does." Before he could protest further, she pulled him into the light. At first, his steps were clumsy, stiff, but Claire guided him with fearless delight. Laughter bubbled from her, unfiltered and pure, and soon Nate found himself matching her rhythm. Around them, neighbors watched with mixed expressions, curiosity, suspicion, some with faint smiles softening the edges of gossip. Evelyn stood at the edge, arms folded, unsure whether to step in or step back. When Claire called, "Mom, join us," she hesitated only a moment before allowing herself to be pulled in. The 3 of them moved together, awkward and uneven, but there was something undeniable about the picture they made. For a brief stretch of music, the years of absence fell away. When the song ended, applause rippled, and Claire beamed at them both. Nate's chest tightened. He couldn't remember the last time he had felt part of something that simple, that whole. Later, As the booths began to close, Ray appeared carrying a tray of leftover cider donuts. "On the house," he said with a wink, handing one to Claire and nodding to Evelyn. His glance toward Nate was steady, but not unkind, as if to say, "You've got eyes on you. Don't waste this." Claire devoured her donut, sugar dusting her chin. Nate reached instinctively with a napkin to wipe it away, then paused, unsure if the gesture was his to make. Evelyn noticed. Without a word, she handed him the napkin. He accepted it, gently brushing the sugar from Claire's face. The girl giggled, unbothered, and leaned against him for a moment too brief but powerful enough to lodge itself in Evelyn's heart. As the crowd thinned, families drifted home, lanterns flickering out one by one. The Whitmores lingered near the riverbank, the water dark and slow under the bridge. Nate stood beside them, the cool air carrying scents of wood smoke and fried apples. "This was the best day," Claire declared, her voice steady despite her drowsy eyes. "Can we do it again next year?" Evelyn brushed a curl from her daughter's face. "We'll see," she said, though her tone lacked its usual firmness. Nate looked at her, quietly grateful for even that small softening. "I'd like that," he added. On the walk home, Claire skipped ahead, notebook clutched tight under her arm. Evelyn and Nate followed more slowly, their steps falling into an uneasy rhythm. "She's happier than I've seen her in a long time," Evelyn admitted quietly. Nate's voice was low, steady. "She deserves every bit of it, and more." He hesitated before continuing. "I know I can't undo the years I missed, but maybe I can show up now, however you'll let me." Evelyn glanced at him, her expression unreadable. The street lamps caught the silver in his hair, the wear in his face. She thought of the whispers earlier, of the judgment that would surely follow. Yet she also thought of Claire's smile, unguarded and full. "We'll take it slow," she said finally. For her, Nate nodded, accepting the boundary as a gift rather than a punishment. When they reached the house, Claire darted inside, already scribbling notes about the day. Nate lingered on the porch. Evelyn paused in the doorway, one hand on the frame. "Thank you," he said quietly. Evelyn studied him for a long moment. "Don't thank me, just keep showing up." He nodded once, solemn. Then he turned and walked into the night, not toward the open road, but toward the rented room he now thought of as temporary. For the first time in years, he carried not just regret, but something else possibility. Inside, Claire pressed a fresh maple leaf into her notebook, beside the photograph. Beneath it, she wrote, "Today, we were together." It felt real. Upstairs, Evelyn watched from her window as Nate's figure disappeared into the dark. Her heart was cautious, but a small, reluctant warmth stirred. She whispered into the quiet room, "Maybe some doors are meant to be opened again." A week after the festival, the first frost glazed the lawns, glittering pale under the street lamps. Evelyn left early for the clinic that morning, her breath rising in clouds as she locked the door. Claire bundled herself in a scarf, her notebook tucked into her backpack, and walked to school with the steady rhythm of crunching leaves underfoot. By afternoon, clouds had rolled in. The sky hung low and gray, and the wind smelled of snow not yet fallen. When the final bell rang, Claire lingered at the edge of the playground. A group of classmates stood in a circle, whispering and laughing. One boy pointed at her and said loudly, "That's the girl who makes up stories about her dad." Claire's chest burned. She gripped her notebook, ready to walk past without a word, when another voice chimed in sharp, cutting. "Yeah, and she brought some stranger to the festival, pretending he's family." Laughter rippled through the group. Claire's throat tightened. She wanted to shout, to wave the photograph like proof, but she knew it would only invite more mockery. Instead, she turned and walked away, her steps quick, eyes stinging. At the corner, she nearly collided with Nate's pickup. He had come to meet her, an unspoken agreement after the festival. His window rolled down. "Hey, kiddo, need a ride?" Her lip trembled. She nodded and climbed in. The cab smelled faintly of coffee and old leather. Nate glanced at her, concern etched across his face. "Rough day?" She pressed her forehead to the cold glass. "They don't believe me. They think you're just some random guy." Nate's jaw clenched. He gripped the wheel tighter, forcing himself to breathe evenly. "I'm sorry, Claire. You shouldn't have to carry that." "I told them you were real," she whispered, voice cracking. But they laughed. Nate pulled the truck to the side of the road, the engine rumbling low. He turned to face her fully. "Look at me." She lifted her tear-filled eyes. You don't need their belief to make it true. I'm here. I'm not perfect, but I'm not going anywhere. You hear me? His voice was steady, carrying a weight that reached beyond promises. Claire sniffled and nodded. She pulled out her notebook, flipping to the page where she had written, "It felt real." She pushed it toward him. "It still does. But I need it to stay." Nate swallowed hard. He wanted to say the right words, but none seemed big enough. Instead, he reached across and gently squeezed her shoulder. "Then I'll keep showing up until even the loudest laugh can't shake you." The truck idled on the quiet street, the wind rustling dry leaves along the curb. Claire leaned against him, small and trembling, but steadying herself with his presence. For Nate, the contact was both fragile and monumental. A child's trust laid in his scarred hands. When they reached home, Evelyn was already there, sorting mail at the kitchen table. She looked up, eyebrows narrowing at the sight of Claire's red-rimmed eyes. "What happened?" Claire dropped her backpack and muttered, "Nothing." She rushed upstairs before Evelyn could press further. Evelyn turned to Nate, her voice low but firm. "What really happened?" Nate hesitated, then told her about the mocking at school, about the words that cut deeper than Claire could show. Evelyn's face tightened with anger and sorrow, her shoulders sagging under the weight. "She's stronger than she lets on," Nate said quietly. "But she shouldn't have to be that strong yet." Evelyn sank into a chair, her hand pressing her temple. "This is exactly what I feared, that bringing you in would hurt her more." Nate leaned forward. "Or it could show her she's not alone. I can't erase the whispers, Evelyn, but I can stand beside her when they come." The silence between them was thick, broken only by the ticking clock. Evelyn studied his face, searching for cracks, for signs of restlessness. Instead, she found a steadiness she hadn't seen before. Finally, she said, "If you mean that, you'll have to prove it not just to her, but to me." Nate nodded, accepting the challenge as if it were an oath. "I will." "Oh." Upstairs, Claire sat at her desk, pen scratching across the page. She wrote through tears, "They tried to make me small, but he stood with me. Maybe that's what family means." Her words blurred as she closed the notebook, clutching it to her chest. The laughter from the playground still echoed in her ears. But for the first time, it didn't drown out the quiet promise that had begun to grow stronger. He was here. The following Monday brought gray skies and a sharp wind. Evelyn left the clinic early, uneasy after the weekend. She couldn't shake the memory of Claire's swollen eyes or Nate's quiet determination. Something in her told her to check in at the school. When she arrived, the playground was buzzing with the last minutes of recess. Children chased each other across the blacktop, their voices carrying on the wind. Evelyn scanned for Claire and froze. A knot of kids had formed near the swings, Claire at the center, her notebook clutched against her chest. One boy sneered, pointing. "Show us your fake dad again." Another girl chimed in. "Yeah, maybe he's just a truck driver who pretends to be a Marine." Laughter erupted. Claire's face burned red, but she stood straighter, refusing to cry. Evelyn started forward, anger boiling, but a figure moved faster. Nate, who had parked his truck nearby on a delivery break, strode onto the playground with purposeful steps. His presence silenced the laughter. He didn't raise his voice, didn't need to. His calm, steady gaze swept over the group until even the boldest child dropped their eyes. He crouched beside Claire, his hand lightly touching her shoulder. "You don't have to show them anything," he said, voice low enough for her but carrying across the silence. "The truth isn't decided by who laughs the loudest." The children shifted uncomfortably. A teacher on recess duty approached, frowning. "Sir, you can't—" Evelyn hurried to intercept, her voice firm but controlled. "It's all right. He's with me. With us." She glanced at Nate, her heart pounding. The teacher hesitated, then nodded and stepped back, the tension easing. Claire lifted her chin, clutching her notebook tighter. "They don't believe me," she whispered. Nate met her eyes. "They don't have to. I believe you. Your mom believes you. That's enough." For a long moment, the playground held its breath. Then the bell rang, scattering the children toward the doors. Some glanced back with new wariness, others with quiet curiosity. None laughed. Evelyn exhaled, her anger shifting into something more complicated. She had expected Nate to retreat, to fumble, but he hadn't. He had stood with Claire, steady and unflinching. And Claire, she realized, looked taller somehow, anchored by his presence. As they walked back to the truck together, Claire slipped her hand into Nate's without hesitation. Evelyn watched, her throat tightening. She had spent years building walls to protect her daughter. Now, for the first time, she wondered if those walls might need doors. At home that evening, Evelyn found Claire at her desk, writing furiously. She peeked over her shoulder and read, "Today, he stood in front of everyone. He didn't shout, he didn't fight. He just stayed. And that was enough." Evelyn's eyes blurred. She stepped back, giving Claire space, but her own heart was shifting. Trust was still fragile, but something undeniable had begun to grow. Later, when Nate lingered at the door preparing to leave, Evelyn spoke quietly. "You handled yourself well today." Nate shrugged, uneasy with praise. "Didn't feel like much." "It was," she said firmly. "For her. And maybe for me too." Their eyes met in the porch light, no longer as strangers bound by regret, but as two parents uneven, imperfect, but both tied to the same fierce love for the child upstairs. Nate gave a small nod. "I'll be back tomorrow. Unless you tell me not to." Evelyn hesitated, then opened the door wider instead of closing it. "Tomorrow, then." As he walked down the steps, the autumn wind lifted, carrying with it the brittle scent of leaves and the faintest promise of snow. Inside, Claire whispered her nightly words to the photo, tucked in her notebook. Not, "I'll find you this time," but something new. "You found me." The first snow arrived quietly, blanketing Brattleboro in a hush that softened every sound. Roofs wore thin white caps, and the church bells echoed brighter against the crisp air. In the Whitmore home, the scent of cinnamon and cloves drifted from the kitchen, where Evelyn stirred a pot of cider. Claire perched at the table, her notebook open. She was sketching snowflakes, each one slightly different, scattered across the page. From time to time, she glanced toward the window, where the driveway showed the familiar outline of Nate's truck. "Is he really coming for dinner?" she asked, excitement carefully masked as casual curiosity. Evelyn smiled faintly. "Yes, and you'll set the table." Claire jumped up, gathering forks and plates with more energy than precision. She hummed under her breath, a tune she'd picked up from the festival fiddlers weeks before. When the knock came, she nearly dropped a spoon in her rush to the door. Nate stood there, brushing snow from his shoulders. He carried a pie pumpkin, still warm, wrapped in foil. "Hope I did this right," he said sheepishly. "You baked?" Claire's eyes widened. "Ray helped," Nate admitted. "I'm no miracle worker." Evelyn stepped forward, her gaze flicking from the pie to his face. "Come in before you freeze." The living room glowed with lamplight. Stockings already hung along the mantel. Nate looked around, taking in the warmth, the signs of a home he had missed building. He felt both welcome and out of place, as though stepping into a photograph that had waited years for him to join. Dinner was simple: roast chicken, potatoes, green beans, but the air carried more weight than any holiday feast. Conversation began cautiously, Claire filling gaps with chatter about school projects and festival memories. Nate listened, responding with gentle questions. Slowly, the stiffness eased. After plates were cleared, Claire fetched her notebook. She flipped to the pages she had guarded most closely, hesitating before sliding it across the table. "I want you to read this." Nate opened it carefully. The entries stretched back weeks, scribbles of hurt, sketches of maple leaves, words of longing. He read the line that stopped him cold. "I don't care if you're late. I just care if you're here." His throat tightened. He closed the notebook and looked at her, his voice raw. "I'm here now, and I'll keep being here. Not just today, always." Claire's eyes filled, but she smiled. She leaned across the table, wrapping her arms around him. For the first time, Nate let himself return the embrace fully. No hesitation, no fear. Evelyn watched, her hand pressing against her heart as though to steady it. Later, when Claire ran upstairs to prepare a surprise, a drawing she wanted to give Evelyn, and Nate were left alone in the quiet kitchen. The snow outside reflected pale light through the window, casting their faces in soft glow. "You've done more than I thought you could," Evelyn said slowly. "You've stayed." Nate met her eyes. "I'm not leaving again." Silence stretched, but it was no longer hostile. It was the silence of old wounds beginning to knit. Evelyn exhaled, letting down a fraction of the guard she had carried for so long. Claire returned, clutching the drawing. She held it up proudly. 3 figures beneath falling snow, mother, daughter, father, hands joined. Beneath it, she had written in careful letters, family. Nate's eyes blurred. He reached out, tracing the word as though it were sacred. Evelyn's throat ached, but she didn't correct it, didn't pull the paper away. She let it be true. The evening ended with laughter around the fireplace. Claire nestled between them, the crackle of logs filling the room. Outside, snow kept falling, covering every scar of the earth with quiet forgiveness. The days that followed seemed quieter, as if the town itself recognized a shift. Snow blanketed the sidewalks, muffling footsteps, and the river slowed under its icy crust. For the Whitmores, the rhythms of life began to adjust to a new presence. Nate's truck became a regular sight in the driveway, no longer a stranger's intrusion, but a mark of constancy. At first, Evelyn struggled with the unease of it. Each time he arrived, she half expected him not to return. But every knock on the door came as promised. Every evening ended with him walking away into the night, only to come back the next day. Slowly, the skepticism she had clung to loosened its grip. Claire thrived under the change. Her laughter came easier. Her shoulders carried less weight. She no longer flinched at the whispers at school. Instead, she carried herself with the quiet assurance that someone would be waiting at the curb, ready to walk her home. The photograph, once hidden in her notebook, now sat in a frame on her desk, no longer a secret, but a piece of her daily life. One evening, as Christmas neared, the three of them attended the town's tree lighting ceremony. Neighbors gathered with thermoses of cocoa, carols rising in the frosty air. Claire held a candle between her mittened hands, her face glowing in the flicker. Nate stood on one side, Evelyn on the other. When the tree burst to life in a wash of golden lights, Claire turned to look at them both, her smile unguarded and whole. Later, walking home through the snowy streets, she skipped ahead, humming carols. Evelyn and Nate followed side by side, their steps falling in an easy rhythm. Evelyn spoke softly, her breath clouding in the cold. "You've changed." "Yeah." Nate glanced at her. "I had to. For her. For myself." She nodded, her gaze lingering on his face. "She believes in you. And I'm beginning to." The words struck deeper than he expected. He didn't respond with promises he knew they were fragile things, but with a quiet nod that carried the weight of a vow. Back home, Claire insisted they sit together by the fire. She handed them each a slip of paper from her notebook. "I want us to write one wish for the new year," she declared. Evelyn smiled gently and played along, jotting a line before folding her paper. Nate hesitated, then wrote slowly, the pencil scratching against the page. Claire folded hers with great ceremony, placing all three slips into a small tin. "We'll open them next year," she said, her voice solemn. Evelyn kissed the top of her daughter's head. Nate reached over and rested a hand lightly on Claire's shoulder, catching Evelyn's gaze as he did. She didn't flinch this time. As the fire burned low, Claire dozed against them, her breaths even and steady. Evelyn pulled a quilt over her and whispered, "She's at peace." Nate watched the flames dance, his voice quiet. "For the first time in a long while, so am I." The room settled into silence, the kind that feels full rather than empty. Outside, snowflakes drifted down, erasing footprints, covering the earth in a blanket of new beginnings. And in that small house on Maple Street, a fractured past gave way to a fragile but undeniable truth. Redemption was possible. Forgiveness could take root, and family once broken could be mended through love that chose to stay.